She's a former law enforcement officer, an expert in martial arts. She's taught self-defense in many police academies. She's a podcaster and more. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Colleagues from Maine, we have Autumn Clifford on the phone. Autumn has quite a story. She's a law enforcement officer. She's got, I'll just call it an expert in martial arts. She's been doing defense training for law enforcement officers in different police academies. She's a podcaster. She's a speaker. What don't you do, Autumn?
I haven't figured that out, Jay. I don't sing.
That's it. I don't sing well. I tell people I sing all the time, but I don't do it with the radio on, because I also am a FM music radio jock as well. You're a current law enforcement or former? What's your current status?
So I am a current, but I'm in a part-time capacity to just basically to maintain my credentials.
Gotcha. See, that's something I'm not familiar with. Where I policed in Maryland, we didn't have part-time. We didn't have reservists. We just had full-time sworn personnel. Before we get into your story, you do a lot of stuff, and a lot of people find information about everything you do online at autumnclifford.com. You got a podcast called Changing the Culture Podcast. It's part of the LET Podcast Network. You just go to letradioshow.com and you'll find it right there. You also do a Google search for Changing the Culture Podcast. You'll find it as well. What are all the different things you do?
Well, I do quite a bit. I'm an adjunct criminal justice professor, which has been really fun. And I am a life coach. I specifically now help first responders. And yes, I'm a second-degree black belt. I've taught self-defense for many years. And I do the part-time police work. So I was injured, so I don't do full-time anymore. We'll talk more about that. But now I'm really in a community policing position and in the capacity to really kind of make a difference in a very small community, and it's been really good.
Well, thank you for your services, very much appreciated. And the injuries, they're common in law enforcement. I don't know if anybody does a significant career in law enforcement doesn't walk away with at least one surgery, if not multiples. That's just the physical injuries. Back injuries are very, very common. Mine was a right hand and wrist, multiple steel plates. And everybody I know in law enforcement is mentally scarred to some degree or another.
So true. And that's why I'm out doing the life coaching thing and really trying to help. We need healthy first responders out there to take care of us.
And your podcast, briefly, what is that about?
Well, that podcast is really about like pulling up car to car. So it's the experience my listeners have, like if they were to pull up next to me when I was on patrol, and we'd just be kind of talking and shooting a breeze, and they learn a lot about that.
One of the things that I like about this show is, and I've been saying this for a long time, Autumn, that we in the police profession have relied on the news media to tell our stories for too long, and they've done a horrible job. And in the last 5 years or so, it's been so biased in reporting it doesn't even remotely resemble the truth. And what Hollywood puts out doesn't really accurately present or even closely represent what law enforcement is like and other first responder jobs in the United States. Do you agree with me?
Oh, fully. The thing about Hollywood, what's coming up in my mind is we see these actors, we see the movies, and like, let's be honest, we all love a good, we like a good cop show. I have a favorite couple few, End of Watch, if anybody's familiar with that. That's a great, it's a really great one. But we don't get to see the life and the buildup of that officer. So we get to see them in a situation or a few different scenarios, but we don't really get to know what makes that officer. And I think that's really important.
It also doesn't really give a good representation, in my opinion, of the amount of violence we see. Violence not 100%. Necessarily inflicted upon us, although that was significant. I went through quite a bit. But just seeing what you see all the time, especially in a family environment.
Yes, so true.
domestics, family disputes, it didn't matter. People say, you signed up for this. You know what you got into. I really didn't know. I thought I knew, but I had real no concept of how violent our American society really is.
100%. When I got on the job, I mean, I was a young woman. I was 20 years old, and I saw my first dead body on the job. It was like my first day on field training, and I saw my first dead body, and it was actually pretty traumatizing for me because I had never seen a dead body, and not only did I have to see it, you know, I had to investigate a scene and a situation.
Not to be morbid, but I went through the same thing as a young patrolman, and you're trained on what to do. You know the protocols, you know basic investigation, everything else, and we got called for every unattended death. And this one turned out to be an old man who died from old age and several diseases, and he was in a bathtub. And I was freaking out because I was like 21.
Yep.
And I was like, how can you really tell for sure if the guy's not alive? And your mind is telling you the guy's definitely dead, but you're touching him going, he's cold. Well, maybe it's the water. And you just don't want to make a mistake so badly because literally it's about someone's life or death.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And until you're in that situation, you don't realize the amount of like pressure, the amount of adrenaline, what your brain does. I mean, I remember with my first situation, my first death, like in my mind, that person like was sleeping because it was an elderly gentleman. He died in his sleep. Thank goodness it wasn't awful. He had been there for a while, but I'm like, oh my goodness, maybe he's just sleeping. And then I'm like, no, he's not. Like, this is real. Get your, act together. But I was just, it's kind of stunned. You don't really know. And then, like you said, you have to investigate. So you have to touch the body. And that was pretty devastating. And turning him on his side was absolutely devastating for me because his body changed. It was no longer what you, like a normal person.
It's not like TV either. One of the things I tell people all the time is when we had new people out of the academy, what we would do when I was a sergeant, if we had a call for a homicide or call for a decomposing body or something of that nature, we would get on the radio and call all the rookies up there. And they had to go in the room because they had to learn how to do this part of the job.
Yes.
And that part of the job is horrible. Look, when you got a call for service that said the neighbors have not seen him for days and the windows are closed and mail is stacked up, and you walk up there and there's flies on the inside of the window, it's not good. And Hollywood doesn't show that. I can tell you, Autumn, without going into gory details, we used to carry a can of Lysol with us in our patrol bag and spray ourselves down afterwards, and that wouldn't get rid of the stench. There was no way to get rid of it.
What we would do up here is we carry, and I still do, is carry Vicks and put it underneath our nose.
Yeah, I tried that too. I can just inhale a lot better all the toxic fumes. We're talking with Autumn Clifford. Autumn has a fascinating story about her law enforcement career. And by the way, she does so much to help law enforcement in the community. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Got questions about your Medicare coverage? Who doesn't? Take a few moments to get real answers and options, all for free. Call 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. Or visit lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com to learn more.
Return our conversation with Autumn Clifford, law enforcement officer, trainer, podcaster, second-degree black belt in martial arts. She's trained self-defense for police academies in New England as well. And one of the things I love about you, Autumn, and this show in particular is breaking stereotypes. And you as a female officer, as a female in law enforcement, and you said earlier, you're 21 years old when you first started. And I was 21 when I first started, and really had no idea what's going on. You try to handle people's situations, their problems in life, and you're 21, still wet behind the ears.
Yes, 100%. And I can just say, as a 20-year-old, I was 20 when I got into law enforcement, and it was something that there's nothing really out there to prepare a young woman for what she's about to go through, because not only is the job, traumatizing and emotional, and we need to be all of these things, but then we can get right into the amount of attention a woman gets for any, even males. As a law enforcement officer, you get a lot of attention. The uniform brings a lot of attention to you, but I'll tell you, as a female, it was something I just was very unprepared for. Just the amount of all eyes on me all the time, especially from coworkers. It was something I just wasn't prepared for.
I don't think you brought up a great memory, because I don't think I would have mentioned that until you did. Being a police officer in uniform is very much like being in a fishbowl. Everybody notices you. When you drive a marked patrol car, everybody notices you. And it was very rare where we worked. We were so busy, and we had what we call our post concepts, where you didn't want people handing calls in your post. So we didn't get a lunch break very often. But when I did, on the very rare occasions, in uniform, when I went to a fast food restaurant for something to eat, if there was a maniac or knucklehead anywhere around, they'd come talk to you. Mm-hmm. It just is unavoidable.
Oh, totally. And where I first started was in central Maine, and it's a big mental health area. And what happened was, one of the biggest mental health hospitals, they shut down a few years prior to me getting in there, and they shut down like half capacity. So all of the people, these mental health patients, they went into halfway homes, and in my patrol. So now I'm in this city, and I'm with people, and I'm trying to figure it out, and you're young, and you're on FTO, and you're all these things, and you're like completely immersed when you're somebody who I grew up half an hour north of where I patrolled, and there's pros and cons to that, but getting to understand the mental health population, it was I'll tell you, absolutely, it was something that nobody could have prepared me for that way either, until you do it. People tell you stories, but until you actually experience it, in my opinion, there's nothing that can prepare you for it.
There really isn't anything. And not to make police or law enforcement sound like superheroes, but our society, and rightfully so, demands a lot of our law enforcement. We expect 21, 22, 23-year-olds to be able to quickly diagnose someone who has mental health issues and who is in a state of distress and needs help and may be exhibiting threatening behavior, and to react in a way where they talk about de-escalating it, where they don't have to use force to end the situation and get the person the help they need. Everybody wants to do that. Every cop I know wants to do that. But you don't always have control of how threatening the situations become. No, I mean, so the thing, in my opinion, and everybody has their own opinion, is that I really believe that policing is very reactive. We're very reactive, no matter what, to the situation presented at hand. We have to react to those circumstances. Of course, it's reactive. It's very much reactive. In your opinion, I agree with 100%. I did have a conversation with Autumn off the air, and for everybody in law enforcement, they might use different terms, but when you're in a phase of graduating the academy, either immediately afterwards or right before you graduate, which is our case, you go into what they call field training with a field training officer, or FTO. And you went through that just like all of us did, and you experience everything because you're with that officer and you're handling calls and you're writing reports, you're doing investigations, and you get corrected as you make mistakes. It's a way of learning on the job. But the real rude awakening for many of us is when you get out of that FTO phase and all of a sudden the patrol car's yours and you get your first call for service and you got to handle it.
Absolutely. My FTO experience was some of the most interesting times of my life. I had two different field training officers. One was really good, and then the other one not so much. And so they actually kicked me out of FTO like 5 weeks early, so a whole month early. The second FTO was like, yeah, you're on your own. Sink or swim, kid.
I remember. I never made it my first call for service. When I got out of the academy, we did FTO before you graduated. Then out of the academy, we were sent to the district we were assigned to. I was given a copy of a map of my post in our district, in our sector, and a battery for the radio. We switched radios, switched patrol car. I got a call we called way down in the hole. I never found it. And it was nonstop call after call after call. And most were routine. Most were not violence and all that stuff. But every now and then they popped up.
Mm-hmm.
You encountered one of those almost immediately after FTO, didn't you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It was a situation that I remember very clearly to this day. If that, leads you to understand the kind of impression that had with me. What happened is I was about, I don't even know, maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds away from this house. I was sitting with another officer, car to car, having a conversation, and a call came over the air. And the call was that a male had a shotgun to a female's head. And I remember hearing that. And when you're new, and you have to understand, my adrenaline is through the roof. Okay. So I'm just whoa. And it becomes very hard to process things. So as a senior officer, you've dealt with things like that over and over again. So you just kind of, even though your adrenaline gets high, you're not as, sensitive as somebody who's brand new and is the pucker factor is just real. So I turn around and I go to this house. Again, it takes me 10 seconds from the time this is dispatched. And if you are, just understand, getting there that quickly can sometimes be very, very bad because you're right in the middle of a very intense call. Sometimes when officers get dispatched, it's a 5-minute delay. Sometimes the call kind of resolves itself, or the intensity is slower.
And we kind of hope that it does. We were talking with Autumn Clifford. We're going to turn to this conversation about this life and death call that she handles. Still impacts her today. This is Law Enforcement Today Show. Autumn, by the way, is a podcaster. She's a trainer. She's a law enforcement officer and trains police academies in self-defense. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
From loneliness to a fulfilling, intimate relationship. Shot at Love, the book, offers insights, life lessons, and a lot of comedy. Get a copy of Shot at Love for all those looking for love and striking out. Written by Carrie Brett, a celebrity photographer and podcaster in Boston. This book will have readers crying, laughing, and learning what to do. Get it at shotatlovebook.com. It's shotatlovebook.com. That's shotatlovebook.com.
If you do any business on social media, creating content is one thing. The trick is, how do you turn those people that comment on your social media into consumers? There's a great tool, and you can get more information at letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Best of all, you can start it for free. letpops.com. Check it out today. This is a Law Enforcement Show. Our guest, Autumn Clifford, is a law enforcement officer in Maine. She's also a second-degree black belt in martial arts, teaches self-defense at police academies. She's a podcaster. Her podcast is called Changing the Culture Podcast. Go to letradioshow.com, LET Podcast Network. You'll find it right there. Or just do a search for Changing the Culture Podcast. You also get more information about her at autumnclifford.com. Before the break, Autumn, you started describing this call for service. Man armed with a shotgun pointed at a woman's head, and you're driving there, and I immediately started to zone out because when you go to these hot calls, I mean life and death calls, and they're dangerous calls, your heart rate starts to elevate. You start to get the adrenaline going. You start racing through your head. What are the procedures? What am I supposed to do? I don't want to make a mistake. I hope this is unfounded.
Absolutely. Exactly. For me, I was like, what am I going to do? When I had this call, I hadn't yet been to the full-time academy, which is common practice up here, is you go on FTO, you get trained, you get kind of released for a month or two, a couple months, and then you go to the full-time academy, you come out, and you're a full-time certified officer. So at that time, I was working with what we call in Maine, you have your green pin. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, what is going to happen? Because what you have to understand is that in law enforcement, there the two most dangerous calls a law enforcement officer can go to are a suicidal subject in a domestic violence situation. And so this was obviously a domestic violence situation, but it could have quickly turned into a suicidal subject, right? And then it could have quickly turned into, I'm going to point my gun at you. And so all of this is racing through my head in a matter of seconds. I'm in a state of complete hypervigilance, which means everything in me is just peaking. I'm at the top. And unless you have practiced navigating through that, you're kind of in like, they call like a red, or some people call it like the black zone. Like you're just like, sometimes some people can like lose peripheral vision and all these things. Thankfully, I had been on months of FTO, been in high stress situations, so I was obviously able to function. But my head is just like, oh my goodness, like, is he gonna try to shoot me? Am I gonna have to shoot this person? Is the wife okay? Is the family, who's in the house? Like, okay, and then I'm starting to think about as I'm getting there, and again, this is a matter of 10 to 20 seconds. I'm like, where is this house? Who's surrounding this house? Where's the public? I want the public to be safe. Where are my backup officers? I want them to be safe. And I'm brand new, so I don't have the experience, and I don't have all the forethinking that, my supervisor, my FTO, who were going, my old FTO, I was no longer on field training officer, field training, but he was coming. And so they have all this foresight. And so we go code, and what code means is my lights and my siren are activated. And so I get there, and of course, you shut it down, and we park, and we're on a safe distance away, and the guy comes out. And this was so incredibly stressful. It was in an apartment complex, and so this was inner city. Houses, apartment complexes lined right up. This had to have been a 6-unit apartment complex, and he was at the top, and it was like this set of stairs that came out right from the sidewalk. So, he was at the top of the stairs, okay, and he had a gun, and he's hysterical. And then, thankfully, we hear the female. She's hysterical, so I know she's alive, and he has the gun, but he doesn't have the gun pointed at anybody at this time. He just has the gun in his hand, so think of it, it's vertical. He has it in his hand, and he's shaking the gun, and he's just hysterically crying. He's upset, he's angry, and he's yelling. And then, so we have multiple officers, and we're, about as safe a distance as we can be, and I'm thinking the whole time, holy cow, holy cow, holy cow, what is going on? What is going on? And that's like what I'm thinking, because this is obviously very scary to me at, a 21-year-old brand new officer. And so what ends up happening is a senior officer starts having conversation with him, and it's not a calm conversation the way that you and I are having a conversation right now. It is, he is like a crisis negotiator at that point. He is negotiating with him. He's telling him, you need to put that gun down. Put the gun down. Please let us save your life. We're going to save her life. Like, put the gun down. Because the truth is if, he just put that gun and started pointing, okay, our way or her way, he would have gotten shot.
And literally, that could be a matter of inches.
Oh, yes.
Because what it's about is, for me, people ask, and I can't really explain because, they weren't there. But the difference between shooting and not shooting all depends on your perception about, is there a threat to the life of either you or someone else? So literally,
absolutely,
you could be okay with what you're seeing and not see a threat, and someone 5 feet to your right could view it as a threat.
Yes, absolutely. You're 100% right. And so that's why this officer that was negotiating with this gentleman, it was just so important. It was so important, and it was so important. And here's another thing that was really important is, and this is like something that maybe a lot of people might not think about, and honestly, I never really thought about until I was in this situation, was like, you want to get in a safe spot, right? Because I didn't want to be shot. But at the same time, I needed a clear picture on what was going on in case I needed to take action. Because the whole point of the police being called was to save this woman's life, because he had a gun up to her head, basically saying, I'm going to kill you. He didn't, by the grace of God. But so so it was a very peculiar situation that a police officer finds them in. Is like, you need to go and deal with the threat, but you need to do it safely, but you want to save lives, but you don't. But if you get shot, then you're just another casualty. Like, you didn't add and help. You were a problem. It doesn't help.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we were always taught on the way to the scene of a hot call, you want to get there safely. You can't help if you're not there, number one. Number two, if you become a casualty, you can't help because now people have to help you. And we had limited resources, and it's a different thing than combat military veterans on the battlefield because you're at home. This is United States citizens you're dealing with and people that are not doing well, obviously. What year was this that this happened?
Oh, geez. 2011 or 2012.
Okay, so we're talking about 8, 9, possibly even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This is before we started having a lot of the conversations nationally about de-escalation and de-escalation tactics, correct?
Yep. I believe it was before the big de-escalation, but we were de-escalating.
That's the whole thing I'm getting at. Yeah, we were taught from day one that you engage, you talk with the person. First of all, we were rude. We were loud. We were taught a term called verbal judo. And the reason we did that, and for people who would see it go, that officer's so rude, so discourteous, that's an emotionally disturbed person that they're yelling at and they're using harsh language. The reason that was done is because it's designed to get the person into a defensive plane where they're not offensive anymore, and they start thinking, ultimately, I don't want this to escalate to use of force. So that's why the officers talk that way. So we were taught early on, the first thing you try to do is make sure you're safe, make sure other people are safe as best as you can at that point, and then find a way to engage them in conversation. Find a point where you guys can have a conversation. Because you can't de-escalate until that occurs. We're talking with Autumn Clifford, law enforcement officer from Maine. She's also a podcaster. She is an instructor and a martial artist, and so much more. When we return, we're going to talk about this potential use of force situation, how it wound up, how they ended it, and much more. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. One of the questions I get all the time, why are you always promoting the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page? Well, because there's no better place on Facebook. That's it. It's simple. Everything about the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show podcast is right there, including great photos, stories you'll want to see, you'll want to share, memorials to law enforcement officers who are killed in line of duty, all that and more. Plus, old episodes of the show can be found on our Facebook page. Just do a search for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show on Facebook and be sure to click like and or follow. We'll see you there. Back to our conversation with Autumn Clifford, law enforcement officer from Maine, also a podcaster, host of the Changing the Culture podcast. You can go to letradioshow.com, find it amongst many other great podcasts there, or do a Google search for Changing the Culture podcast. Also, her website is autumnclifford.com. Before we went to break, Autumn, you're talking about this call. Brief overview. A suspect, as a term we use a lot, it was a domestic disturbance call. He had a gun pointing towards a woman's head. He was upset. You and other officers have him surrounded. You're basically just you're wet behind the ears rookie. And you're trying to save this woman's life and talk him down so that force doesn't have to be used. Were you able to successfully do that?
Yeah, I absolutely, thankfully. So what ended up happening was, again, so I'm brand new. I was not the point officer here. I was with a bunch of senior officers, and so typically a rookie will know their space, know where they need to be.
They'll know their place.
So I did.
Stand over there and just look menacing. Don't say anything. Don't do anything.
That's exactly right. That was exactly right. So I'm there, and I'm at a safe distance, and the guy comes out, and he has a gun, but it's not pointed at us. He's got it. It's vertically, but he's shaking it around, and it very quickly could have escalated. So a senior officer starts negotiating and talking with him, and drop the weapon, just put it down. You're going to be fine. Come talk to me. Come talk to me. And it sounds like it happened very quickly. It took like 3 minutes for this guy to set this gun down. But what you have to understand, he dropped the gun, but those 3 minutes felt like 3 hours.
Absolutely.
Because you are so focused, and you're like, if this guy if he puts that gun, if he maneuvers it, if he does anything, what if he gun butts her because he has her, like she's like right next to him. I can't remember if he had her like in a chokehold at that time. At some point he did. He had the gun up to her head and they were wrestling and this stuff. But I can't remember where she was at, but I know she was clearly near him. And so we're watching her from a safe distance. I'm down on the road, on the streets. He's up at like 3 stories, but he's outside on this deck. And the senior officer is talking to him and gets him down. And guy comes down, and then he starts fighting. He like swings at this officer, which I couldn't understand for the life of me. But all I could think is, I believe he was on drugs, and he was so angry and so frustrated. And the senior officer gets him to walk down the stairs by himself and drop the gun, and so he does. And the officer, grabs his arm because he's obviously under arrest, and at that point it was on. But the officer was able to, before anybody could even get there and assist him, the officer was able to effect an arrest. The guy calmed down, and he's crying, and he was arrested. The woman. And
it's pretty sad to see that. That's the other part of it. It's very sad. I don't know what do I describe it. When people are that upset, they're that disturbed, they're that emotionally off balance, it's almost, it really tugs at your heartstrings. But you've got to take them into custody, and you've got to get them to medical examination, find out whether they're okay, whether criminal charges are placed. It's kind of out of your hands at that point. But thinking, what gets people to that point?
Well, I'd like to just add this really quickly, and then I'll answer that. We could talk about that. But I want to say this, is that was really traumatizing for me. And I will never forget this gentleman's name. And it was very scary, okay? Because I had never seen people act like that. And as a brand new officer, I didn't come from, I come from an Italian family. Everyone yells, and everybody is you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, everybody is that. But the thing is like, I've never been in, like, I didn't grow up like that. That was, to see a domestic violence situation like that with a gun, and it was very traumatizing for me. And I never forgot that guy's face, and never forgot his name. And, he was arrested, and it was sad because it's like, geez, what happened? Like you said, like, what brought like this happening? I'd say like a year later, because I went to the academy 3 months later. So a year later, I'm out on the road now. I'm, fully trained up officer, and I have a call, and I go, and it was, I think it was I want to say it was like a loud noise complaint in an apartment, and I find this same gentleman hiding in a closet, but he's not hiding from me. He's like living in this closet, and he was not like this tough guy, didn't have any weapons or anything. He wasn't this big tough guy that he was that night. He was like this meek and like, just like, I'm just chilling here. Like, my friend, like, I get to stay with him. I don't really have a room. They have like a 1-bedroom apartment. So I'm like staying in this closet, and I'm like, and it was just so like, wow, like, what happened from you to go and be this person who was obviously having a mental breakdown, like, but violent enough to hold a shotgun up to his girlfriend's head, to end up, a year or so later, now you're living in a closet and very like, I don't want any problems, I'm sorry, ma'am, officer, very polite, very fine with me. And I think the answer to that question was drugs. I think he was addicted to drugs.
You're probably right. And in my career, I got to see people in so many different degrading situations, not always that they put themselves in, where they lived in subhuman conditions. And we could talk about that at length at another time. When this call was over, when the guy was successfully taken into custody, it's like you go from being at level red, where you're on fire and all your nerves are focused on this and trying to successfully de-escalate it, to everything's over with. Now you can go about your business and handle a parking complaint.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that easy to do, is it?
No. Nope. And that's the hypervigilance pattern. There's a author, I'm sure you're familiar with him, Jay. His name is Dr. Kevin Gilmartin.
Oh, yeah.
So he wrote a book called The Emotional Survival of Law Enforcement. And so he was a police officer. He's retired from Arizona now. And he wrote a book for us. And so he talks about this hypervigilance pattern. And I've expanded upon that in what I do now. And you're right. And this is, if you don't know how to deal with your emotions, for somebody, and this could be really with any profession, for somebody who goes from high stress, and we're talking like in 20-minute intervals, right? So it's like high stress, low stress, high stress, no stress, super high stress, okay, nothing.
Yeah.
And you go through that, 40, 50, 60 hours a week for years on end, and you think that doesn't have an impact on your life and your nerves and your mood, then
to be honest with you, it still does with me. And I have to always watch myself and be aware and be mindful in terms that really sound annoying, but it's everyday life for me. And it's not just law enforcement. People who work like retail. Imagine this. You have 3 customers in a row. They're phenomenal. And then you have a person that's just angry. And if you go there with them, you can start losing control of your own mental, emotional boundaries. We'll have to talk about that another time. Before we run out of time, let's talk about your website, your podcast, what you do, where people get more information.
Absolutely. So my podcast is the only self-help podcast that is hosted by, obviously, a female cop. So my podcast is if you're going through a mind funk, if you are having a hard time, you feel stuck, or you just need a little motivation, my podcast is we have a lot of information very helpful for that. It's called Changing the Culture. You come to my website, autumnclifford.com. When you land there, I have a free training, and I really encourage anybody who's kind of going through a tough time or just wants to become more resilient in their life, come and take this free training. I named it Got Grit. And basically it's a 3-part training where I'm going to walk you through how to literally take control of your thoughts and your mindset so that you can live a happier life. If you're on social media at all, come and hang out with me at Officer Autumn. I'm on TikTok and I'm on Instagram.
By the way, all this stuff is great for law enforcement officers, other first responders, combat veterans, military veterans, and everybody else. Autumn, thanks again for your service, and thanks so much for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me, Jay. Appreciate it.
This was the podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk radio show. And be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. Back in just a few days, another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.